Today, I'm joined on the podcast by someone who helps leaders not just perform better, but live and lead more wholeheartedly. Phil Brady is the founder of Vitamin P Coaching, where leadership meets emotional intelligence, energy, and purpose.
We need to develop the capacity to hold multiple perspectives, or else we just keep bumping up against you versus them and the stuff that we see going on in the world at the moment. I'm in the process now of creating villages around where I am and where I go, and I just did the same in my kind of corporate work as well. And people sense that I'm genuine, and that's a word that I get an awful lot is we know that you're genuine. And so just cultivate those relationships around you, one conversation at a time. What I say is I go into the forest and I found my heart. I found what I was maybe dishonoring or not paying attention to and betraying by living up to a persona and not being or doing what I wanted to actually do and be in the world. The disconnect of something like COVID, where everything went virtual and remote and our worlds became smaller, I think my world has become even smaller again because
Hello and welcome back to My Kind of People. And today I'm joined on the podcast by someone who helps leaders not just perform better, but live and lead more wholeheartedly. Phil Brady is the founder of Vitamin P Coaching, where leadership meets emotional intelligence, energy, and purpose. Phil is planting seeds and literal trees with a mission to plant a tree for every client he works with. Phil brings depth, clarity, and compassion to every conversation. He's not just shaping better leaders, but he's also helping build a more conscious future. He is absolutely my kind of person. So welcome to the podcast, Phil Brady.
Thank you so much. That's the intro I would hope to live into. So thank you for putting that together. It's beautiful.
You're welcome. That is all you, my friend. We can put it on MP3 for you if you want. Give you a little pep round Tesco's. But welcome. I'm so grateful to have you here. We were just talking before about the whole ethos of the podcast, and this audience are all about creating positive change in their own lives. And I was just really excited to have you on because you're creating so much positive change in the space that you're in.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to be here. Glad to have this conversation and looking forward to hearing from your perspective as well. What you've
Yeah.
been up to. We haven't caught up for a while, so
No,
yeah.
we haven't. So just to throw that in, so Phil and I first met in person. We're at a event run by one of our mentors, right? Because it wouldn't be fair to be coaches and mentors who didn't believe in it themselves. And we actually
Yeah.
met in the lunch line of all places at
Yeah.
Old Trafford Football
hmm
Stadium. So quite the meet and greet, I'd say.
It was. And I mean, we went to the depths of connection within a few walks towards the hot chicken wings or whatever it was that was on the tray in front of us.
We did. I think we went in deep before we'd even got names. I think that's our kind of vibe.
I think
What's
so.
the meaning of life? Then
Exactly.
what's your name?
Yeah.
So yeah, and yeah, been so awesome to stay in contact and champion each other and to deepen our friendship since. So today will be an exciting one, and I like to start off asking guests that come on, where have you grown and flown? So where did you grow up, and where are you now?
Hmm. So I'm getting goosebumps already, which is unusual, but that's a good sign, I guess. So I grew up in Dublin in Ireland and went to primary school there. And my family and I moved then to Navan, which is about an hour northwest. And that's where I would have went to secondary school. So a lot of my formative years were Dublin, but a lot of them were really like fundamentally in Navan and small town, knew everybody, people waved to each other on the street, that kind of dynamic. It's changed an awful lot since. Um, but a lot of good people, good connections, good experiences started there. And then in 2014, moved to Northern Ireland. And I moved up to take a job in one of the largest banks in the world. And we said we'd give it a year. And nearly 11 years later, we're still here. We've built a little life. We have a dog, a cat. Sorry, I should do it in the order that they arrived. A cat, a dog, and then my little son Jack was born 9 months ago. So Northern Ireland and just outside it in Bangor is where is home now. and we love it here. We're near nature. Um, we spend a lot of time by nature, and yeah, it's been a beautiful lifelong journey to here, but it's been worth it so far. And I said to you before we press record as well, it feels like it's only getting started. So that's where I was born. What was the word you used? Something and then
But
flown?
grown and flown, yeah.
So
So where you
grown.
are now.
Yeah, grown and now flown. So flown into Bangor, Northern Ireland.
I love that. And like you say, just getting started, which is really exciting. So
Yeah.
it's exciting to see where the journey continues. And you said growing up, you actually lived in quite a small town. Everyone knew everyone. And of
Mm,
course, such a big part of your role is connection, right?
mm.
And relationships and conversations. How was that adjustment going from small town, everybody knows everyone, you've really got that deep connection, going to literally work for like one of the largest banks in the world and then speaking more to the masses?
It's so it's a good question. So how I make sense of it and how I did was I just built villages wherever I was.
Mm,
So to create that feeling of connection and closeness, and you said about emotional intelligence before, like to build those emotional connections to people, you can do that virtually and you can do it in person. I was working with most people that were virtual. So I mean, my team was around the world when I left. I had a global role. So it's different. And I mean, we can go really deep for a second as well. Like that sense of disconnection has also been part of this journey and then
mm,
reconnecting with myself along the way. Like I said, I'm only getting started, but it's mostly because I feel I'm only getting reconnected with myself in the last few months, maybe years. So the disconnect of something like COVID, where everything went virtual and remote and our worlds became smaller. I think my world has become even smaller again because Jack is here and I
mm,
want my orbit to be tight, which causes disconnection, but that's also giving me this longing and sensation of wanting more connection wider than what it had been. So I'm in the process now of creating villages around where I am and where I go. And I just did the same in my kind of corporate work as well. We can create that sense of community wherever we go. And I'm just doing it kind of one conversation at a time.
beautiful. And I was going to say, how do you create villages? And is it for you as simple as that, one conversation at a time?
Hmm. So yeah, I think so. I think I trust people first. So I just go straight to connection. And I try not to have the expectation that other people would be the same, but I try to meet them where they are. And people sense that. People sense that I'm genuine. And that's a word that I get an awful lot is we know that you're genuine.
Mm,
So that means people can trust me and us. But I guess if we were, so I'm not sure who's listening, right? But if you're trying to build a village yourself, think about what you're curious and excited about, and then try and do that more. And then you'll build conversations with the person beside you who might be doing something similar. And I literally live just like an hour ago, I was in a conversation about this. So give of yourself in that, but also create the space to receive who the other person is in that. And that
mm,
dynamic and flow scales. And it's not like an engineer where you're trying to artificially create this thing. You're like a farmer, you're planting seeds around you. And that will mean there will be people who might be weedy. Um, you can't get rid of them, but you can spend less time with them. And so just cultivate those relationships around you, one conversation at a time.
I love that. And I asked that question because I think, especially you've done a lot of work in the corporate world, right?
Mm.
Working with entrepreneurs, leaders, executives. And I don't think village is a word that's used often. I think in that space we might hear teams, right? But I think there's still a lot of corporate connotations that come with that, right? And when we use
Mm.
team, that does bring more of a sense of togetherness,
Hmm.
right? We have this shared goal, but I think village is such a beautiful way to describe it. But I ask that because I don't know if many people feel like would they might feel like to an extent they might have a team, but might not necessarily have a village. So for anyone who doesn't have that, how do you
Yeah.
create it?
Yeah, and I don't use village. I'll talk about team or community or because again, the language is different. The stories we
Yeah.
tell outside of the organization are very different than the ones inside. So eh, can I tell you the what I smuggle in as
Please.
often as I can? So
Please.
so my connection to nature. I mean, do you know anything about that journey or
Yes, but I would love for the listeners to hear more about this because I've heard you talk before and I loved how you weaved in nature to this.
and if I've missed anything that you understand from the journey, just add it in as well,
Yeah.
right? So when I was bumping up against wanting to leave corporate, so I'd spent 20, maybe 20 years, different roles, global work, coaching, facilitating, flying around the world, all this kind of stuff. It's really cool. But I bumped up against the constraints of being in an organization, and it's really lonely. It's difficult when you are living the ideal according to some people, but you're suffering internally. And that
Mm.
juxtaposition or dissonance or resistance is really tough. And I, during COVID, found out from my neighbor that there's a forest a kilometer from my house, and I never knew how to get to it. And so I would walk there every lunchtime, and I spent a lot of time in the forest during COVID. And I remember going one day lonely, like very just low, and feeling like all of that resistance and like just it was like probably one of the lowest times I've had.
Mm.
And I walked, I knew the paths, but I just decided to wander wherever I was gonna go. I was just wandering. And I remember where on the path I just had this sensation of connection. And so what I say is I go into the forest and I found my heart. I found what I was maybe dishonoring or not paying attention to and betraying by living up to a persona and not being or doing what I wanted to actually do and be in the world. So a lot of my development since has been how do I take my heart, if it's so clearly found in the forest, back into the chaos of reality and life?
Yeah.
And so now I want more people to bump up against nature. So I'm planting trees for the people that I work with. And I had come up with a number, but it was an absolute ego number. And I've taken it down off everything because I'm like, I just want to plant more trees so that there's more possibility for people to do this. Um, so yeah, that's some of the story. What do you
That's
remember or what's different or the same?
No, I think you'd said the same thing, and I just had like when you talk about different concepts, we both share a interest and expertise in breath work, and also how you just would weave different parts of nature in, and I think it's so relatable, right? Because we all exist in nature, it's always around us, and so yeah, I wanted. I appreciate you sharing a little bit of that journey. And again, it's bringing it back to this stuff that is around us. That's why I think it is actually such a shame. I get it because I've been in the space before that changing our language to suit the environment we're in, right? So it makes sense that actually, when you're in that corporate environment, you do use Teams. But I think it's a shame because I actually think village is such a beautiful description and something that we actually do experience in different ways. How many times do we hear? You just talked about, you've not long had your son. It takes a village to raise a child. It really does. And I think even if we don't have children, that sense of our environments, right, that we spend so much of our time living in, building in. I wish actually we did see more in the corporate world things as a village rather than just necessarily teams.
Yeah, and nature. So let me just dig into this a little bit more. So what
Yeah.
I'm trying to smuggle in is we're all connected.
Mm.
And the mycelium network that connects trees, I mean, they feed and nourish each other. And when one tree is attacked, it sends a signal down through that network to warn the family of trees closest to it. There's a predator to us, send out an acid into the leaves so that that predator being like a giraffe eating the leaves, right? Not a lion
Yeah.
eating a tree. And the giraffe will get that acidic taste and actually move away to a different family of trees. But it's the same. We're interconnected in the workplaces. We are emotionally contagious, sometimes unaware of that. We engage in conflict, not realizing that that kind of conflict is just our edges bumping up against each other. And there's so much, not just friction, but like energy that can come from that interaction if we actually just hold it a little bit lighter. Like we're built for being in connection to each other, just like nature. So I just try and bring people there because it's very different from the workplace, which is an environment that just triggers that stuff in us. Get them into a forest, get them sat looking out at the sea, and it's very different what becomes possible.
For sure, for sure. And I think the more we have that sort of real life context, that bigger why, right?
Mm.
And that familiarity, like it helps us take out us. It's so difficult sometimes to see things when you're in it.
Mm.
But when you can actually take yourself out of that being in it and actually see the bigger picture, that bigger, I know, interconnectedness, that word could seem like woo woo for people, but it is that idea of like as human beings, that's our greatest asset is our ability to connect with each other. And we have so many ways to do it, whether it be speech, movement, physically, emotionally. And yeah, I love the idea of expanding these words and thinking about it outside of that corporate context.
Mm. So I just need to get braver about bringing it in more explicitly. So that's the invitation I'm taking so far from this conversation.
Me too, because I think there's a lot of people that can be nodding to that, right? Of how we change our language to suit the environment we're in. And I think that that's beautiful in many ways, right? And it can make it more accessible, but also, thinking about that bigger picture. And actually, if we challenged ourselves, if I can't use the words I normally use, what could I use instead? Maybe that could invite a different kind of conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, there's belonging in stories, there's belonging in language that excludes. And if you exclude, I mean, you're going to bump up against that. It's going to become an issue at some point. So, yeah, there's always a higher art, like an overarching story that we just haven't gotten curious enough yet about.
Yes.
But it's time to, I mean, if we talk about nervous system stuff,
Yeah.
we need to develop the capacity, and this is all adult development, really well researched stuff. We need to develop the capacity to hold multiple perspectives, or else we just keep bumping up against you versus them and the stuff that we see going on in the world at the moment. And I mean, enough. It's time for better.
Definitely. And speaking of, we were talking about, language. I always like to not assume what something means to someone else. So
Mm.
if we talk about coaching then, as you're a coach, what does the word coach mean to you? What is
Mm.
coaching? How would you define that?
So it's changed, right? And I've changed my mind. So I'm coaching. So the honest story is I'm coaching since I was 12.
Hmm.
The formal story is I've been formally coaching since 2013. So the difference is 13 years. In the year 2000, I had my first coaching conversation. And I learned then what I am now trying to live into as a coach, which is just be present and ask questions. Whereas what I thought coaching was when I first qualified was I need to move you from where you are to a better place. Now, how I see coaching. So it's helpful until it's not.
Yeah,
Because typically what we'll do is we'll judge and shame people to change. We give them reasons to shame and judge themselves so that they feel they should change. And I just now, for my own development, want to just let go of all those shoulds and shame and judgments and be where I am and unveil the experience that I have right now and help create that safe, energizing, present environment for the person in front of me. And change becomes possible the safer people feel and the more present they feel. So now how I describe coaching is because it needs to evolve as well with the world that we're in. Being with what is and uh, increasing choice in the next moment versus reaction.
And how do you increase choice in the moment?
So if we go back to if I just increase your stress and I trigger trauma,
Yeah,
you will respond in a pattern that's habitual or embodied from a reaction in the past. So it's a past event being triggered in the present.
yeah,
You lose choice because your body and instincts will take over, remove your prefrontal cortex from the decision-making process to even realize you have a choice, and you will just default to whatever that safe pattern is. To increase choice, you must become, you're invited to become present, recognize those patterns, and like literally I was journaling about it before this, right?
mm,
So literally a conversation I had before this one, stuff came up for me that we talked about because it was that kind of conversation. I mean, it's this stuff is live all the time. But recognizing those patterns of, oh, I'm not, for example, one of the ones for me, and again, this is maybe oversharing, but I'm just trying to be as open-hearted and wholehearted as I can be, right?
yeah, and I appreciate that.
One of the stories that my body remembers is taking in relationship isn't good. I
Hmm.
need to always be the giver. So I
Yes.
can't take from relationship because then I might lose them and then I'm lost.
Yeah.
So always give. So that's why I've collected thousands of books that I've read and information and knowledge and all this kind of horse shit that solidifies an identity of safety, but is built on a deck of cards that's crumbling. So becoming aware of that pattern has opened me up to the possibility of this aliveness and dynamic of choice
Yeah.
in relationship now. So I think that's some of how. So awareness of presence in the body in the moment. You talked about breath work earlier on.
Yeah.
Like just start with awareness of the breath. Wiggle your toes and see can you feel them? Bodily sensations. And then just soften the expectation on the next moment. And I think the choice becomes a little bit clearer.
Yeah, and breathwork is such a powerful tool to do that, right? Because it's literally like to focus on your breath immediately puts you in the presence. You can't have two thoughts at one time. So if you're actually focusing on that, it's going to bring you presence. But also physiologically and like physically, you are slowing down your nervous system. You're putting it into that parasympathetic state, right? You have the, for anyone listening who's new to that, you have the autonomic nervous system, you have the sympathetic side. Most people have heard of that, fight or flight, that stress response. We do need that at times. The other side, the parasympathetic side, is that rest and digest response. When we slow breathe, it's also slow nasal breathe that can help slow down our nervous system and put us in that calmer response to respond. Because, like you said, you've got and your prefrontal cortex in your brain, that's like, you've got that decision maker, almost the CEO. Your brain is operated to take you towards reward and away from threat. So if it thinks something's threatening, real or not, it's a bit like a fire alarm, right? If you think a building's on fire, you're not going to leave your CEO your prized good
Yeah.
in the boardroom, are you? No, you're going to take everybody out, so you're not going to be thinking clearly. So, I think that was so well described by you, Phil, because it is that idea that if you are going straight into those almost like triggers and trauma responses, then people do like whether they intend to or not, so they do switch off, right? They're not able to have that same level of connection because they're not thinking clearly, and they've essentially taken the CEO out of the boardroom.
Because it's not present.
No,
It's a remembered pattern. And I mean, there's no judgment there. I mean,
no.
I've read you out more or less one of the ones that I recognize in myself today. There's no judgment. So it's get curious and get like create some wonder about these. What is it that's going on? What's removing my ability to choose here? Oh, I mean, the craving for chocolate at 9 p.m. for me is very strong. So I just don't buy it for the house.
You're not on
That's
your
an
own there.
but that's an instinct that comes from some kind of soothing of my nervous system. And I mean, you said about the sympathetic and parasympathetic. Like my business is vitamin P, which is
Yeah.
parasympathetic. And the more intentionally we can regulate ourselves towards movement between them, not just living in sympathetic,
Yep.
the more we increase our range of thoughts, emotions, and our ability to have the energy for whatever the world can throw at us, and we increase our capacity and our ability to connect with other people. So I deeply believe in the value of just some awareness around these things, some compassion, because with awareness, it's a double-edged sword. You can beat yourself up with more awareness. You must develop self-compassion. And I mean, again, self-proclamation. This is something I'm trying to work on because I'm cruel to myself sometimes. And I hadn't honored that word to myself until an hour ago as well. And again, I'm just trying to be transparent. This is live work that we all go through and that I equip and support and walk leaders through as well.
Likewise, there's so many things I'll be helping my clients with that I'm actively still working on
Yeah.
myself. For me, there's no pedestal in coaching. We're just walking this journey
Oh,
together.
you mean you haven't arrived, Meg?
Yeah.
No, not yet.
I know. I hate to break it. I'm announcing it live on the podcast. Just watch the listeners drop.
Yeah.
No, it's that constant like walking that journey together, right? We're all doing that. And I think reflection is such a powerful tool to do that. It's also a very personal tool. So, in a context like this where we can discuss and have more of those intimate connections and conversations and reflection afterwards, how do you share that message to a greater audience when you do a lot of public speaking in particular in corporations? How do you change how you share that message?
Somewhat. So, hearts and minds, typically I'll gather evidence to convince the mind so it can settle, and then I just try to speak to hearts. So, again, it's a smuggling in. If I went straight in with, you are contagious to the people around you, and you're not always aware of that contagion, that's probably going to get people's back up. If I go in with the research around coherence and heart rate variability and can show them live on the screen, which I can do when I'm presenting, here's you going from chaos into coherence. Here's what switches back on when you're here. And here's some things that help you stay there a little bit longer. It's invitational and it's conversational rather than judgment and me just, I mean, a big thing about me when I do talks is it's not a talk at, it's a conversation with. Like I've done the sage on the sage stuff. I've done it. I don't want to do that. I want to involve all of us because I want to learn from the group as well. So it's a conversation with, but it's talking to hearts and minds. It's here's the data, here's your lived experience, here's some stuff that might be interesting. Use what's helpful, discard the rest.
And do you think that data is the good in then, right? Because when we can see that data, it's almost a bit like we were talking about earlier. It's that step out of yourself, bird's eye view. It's almost like, oh, like, seeing it as a case study of someone else, like what Phil's sharing makes total sense there. Look at this case study of how someone's gone in from this state of chaos more to calm. And then when they see that reward, then, as I say, our brain goes towards reward away from threat. It feels much less threatening than when we then bring that conversation more back, reflect it more back to getting them to think about themselves and how it applies to themselves.
Yeah. Or flip that and say, no, the data is actually their experience and get them talking about that so that they trust the statistics. Because I can make one up right now and people will believe it once there's a percentage number after it. Like the top two emotions for leaders in industry are anxiety and frustration. It's 76% of their experience is that those two emotions.
Yeah, we'd have none the wiser. We'd just be like, wow, great
None the wiser,
statistic. Hmm.
right? But if I ask you, what's the emotion you experience as a leader when your team, you thought your team were aligned and clear on why you're changing and just keep recreating the past? What comes up for you? Oh, well, I mean, it's frustration.
Yeah.
And then tell me how you balance entering into new markets or trying to keep your board, your C-suite, your stakeholders, your shareholders, your peers and team happy. Like that's an open-ended threat that's unknown. I mean, anxiety is the response.
Yeah.
So like there's ways of framing the data internally first so that the other data is just it's just a lived experience.
Yeah, really clever way of doing it too, because it invites them in without it feeling threatening, right? And it's no, you feel this, you feel that. It's actually getting them to think for themselves, how would I
Mm.
feel?
Mhm. Without judgment.
Yeah.
Normal. Oh, cool. I know I get frustrated when those things happen. I know I feel anxious whenever I'm not sure.
Also, it gives them that it centers them without a spotlight, which is important, and also makes
Yes.
it relevant to their experience. A example I use all the time is throughout my life, I guess that's why coaching works. People have said, you know what, I think you'd be good at, I think you'd be a really good teacher. And I found that frustrating because I'm
Mm.
someone who loves learning, but I didn't feel like learning really suited me and the way it was taught.
Mm.
And so maths is a really good example I use, right? I think so much of the maths curriculum that was taught, I couldn't see how it applied to me. How would I use this in everyday life? So it's really easy to switch off or feel that frustration, right? Because I was like, I can't connect with it. So I think it's so clever when, how you do coach and get people involved. It allows them to be centered without that spotlight and actually see how is this relevant to me.
Mm. And I mean, some of the most healing words I say to leaders, because typically they don't talk to each other. And if you're senior in an organization, you don't get feedback. You don't get to ask people how you're doing, right? But I speak to people across industry and I just say to people, oh, that's so normal. And it's profound.
It is because so much of this stuff we think, same with myself and my clients, right? When I actually talk to them about, do you actually know what the process of change is like and actually how that experience is universal? They're usually shocked with some of the things I describe of like, oh, I thought that was entirely individual and on my own. And it's often the things that we root ourselves in shame for or
Yep.
guilt for, and we think no one else would understand.
Mm.
Whereas actually, so much of that process is universal. We just don't talk to each other about it.
Yep. So again, back to villages and connection. If we just had better conversations about this in the garden that is between and among us, it might be a little bit nicer to be in.
Definitely. I think absolutely. And we, I said at the start, we would be a little bit hypocritical to be in that coaching mentorship world and not believe in it on ourselves. So, who are some people that you've met in your journey that have grounded your belief in why coaching and mentorship can be so powerful? How have they instilled that belief in you?
I mean, so I'm not going to name anyone, right? But I mean, I've been exposed to like the ranked number one executive coach in the world, spent time in his house. Um, I've had therapists, I've had mentors from the coaching space, but also outside the coaching space as well. So they come in many different outfits and clothes and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, it, I would also say that Jack has been the best mentor to me in 9 months already. So I've had some profound insights because of him. And if ever you get lost in the chaos of life and the noise that tells you you should be different than you are, and you have this thing that knows no different than the moment in front of it, looking at you, thinking that you're enough, it cuts through all the bullshit you've believed up to that point. So I can't convince somebody else to get mentored, but all I can do is invite you to experiment with asking for help or being open to learning.
Mm.
And that can come in every direction. Doesn't have to be like, oh, I mean, this expert or whatever. It can be the baby. Because, can I share why?
Please, please do.
I mean, everything between me and Jack, the distance between us has been my lived experiences, positive and negative, and the choices that I've made.
Hmm.
And his ability to embody aliveness, I'm trying to get back because I've disconnected from it, because I'm beating myself up or I'm telling stories I should be different than I am, or all that stuff. So, like returning to the body and experiencing aliveness, he does without even thinking about it because he's not yet thinking. Like, there's so much wisdom there.
For sure. And I think that is such a beautiful experience that you share when you spend time with children. I think like if you went to like a playground, right, you will see kids absolute head first
Hmm.
on the equipment, falling off, just figuring it out, right? They've just got this absolute openness and willingness for failure and experimentation. I'll pick up on that later, but I love the fact that you use that word. And
Hmm.
it's this ability because they don't see it as failure, right? Everything is just an experiment, everything is exploration, and this willingness to do that. And we all had that at some point, but unfortunately, then as we get older and adult influences come in and this micromanaging, usually for our own, it's meant to be for our own well-being, right? They want us to be more cautious. But as these voices come in and start inputting and micromanaging, we tend to lose that ability or willingness rather, because the ability, I believe, is always there. We lose that willingness for exploration and giving things a go. And before we know it, we almost become that critical voice to ourselves.
Hmm. And it's not even just willingness, it's also permission.
Yes, great
Like
word.
allowing yourself to move as freely as a child. When you're playful, you will come up with the solutions that have been avoiding you because you've been trying to control or take yourself too seriously in your decision making, your idea generation. The more playfulness, the safer your nervous system, the more access you have to the wisdom you contain, but also that the people around you contain. I mean, the research in all of this stuff is profound. We're just too serious to listen and experiment with it.
Yeah, and that's where I think exploration is such a good word to use. I would love actually for failure just to be less taboo and people be more comfortable with that word. But
Mm.
I feel like failure has such negative connotations for people because they see it as the end of something, right? I've given this a go and it's failed. I've
Mhm.
not succeeded. That's almost end of the journey there. But when you look at it, and I loved the word as an experiment,
Mhm.
experiments is about figuring out, right? I have this hypothesis that I want to try. I'm going to go through an experiment and I'm going to see what the results are. And then
Mhm.
we'll go from there. That is what failure does. But for whatever reason, we have this taboo for the word failure. And that's why I would like to invite more people to see it as an experimentation, because that is what it is. And that's how children see it.
Mhm. And it's the same with change. So again, if you want to change diet, you want to change behavior, you want to change anything, you experiment your way there, or you create this plan that reality hits, and then the plan is out the window. But instead, if you had experiments set up, so for example, I'm testing behavior change for myself at the moment, and it's really simple and it's really silly. I've moved the towel from the downstairs bathroom from the rail to the radiator. So one is to the right hand side of the sink and one is behind me. And I catch myself every time reaching to the right when I should be reaching behind. So the experiment is, can I slow myself down enough before my hand leaves the side of my body or the sink to go, oh, it's behind, right? This doesn't have to be clever stuff. It can be really silly. Do you want another one for like, you know, the way people are afraid of speaking in public
Yep.
or doing anything silly in front of people?
I love analogies, so bring them on, please.
If you, permission to be really silly with this, right?
Please.
If you wet your eyebrows
Yeah.
and then go into public,
Yeah.
you'll have the sensation and awareness of them.
Hmm.
You will be convinced and project onto the crowd that they know your sensation and discomfort, and nobody cares.
What do
It's
you
the same
mean
for us,
that the general public don't have an invested interest in my eyebrows, Phil?
right? It's only visible and aware to you.
Yeah.
What if we softened the hold of that and got a little bit more playful? I might speak in public more often because I'm aware that my sweaty hands, nobody can see when I'm speaking in front of people. Only you, and you project that, everybody is judging you for it. It's not that you're judging you for that.
Yes, and I love the use of the word soften as well, because we don't have to go to either extreme, right? Like we are adults, we've lived experiences. We have learned in many ways, in good ways, to be a bit more cautious, right? We can't, unfortunately, live our whole life with the reckless abandon of kids. That wouldn't work either. But we can definitely find that in between. It's a little bit like if you go bowling,
Mm,
right? You could spend the whole day throwing the ball in the gutter, which isn't going to be much fun, right? But when you're starting out, you could actually put the bumpers up, slow the ball down and give yourself some time to actually have some fun and play the game. And I think that's what we need a little bit in adulthood, right? As adults, we can be the bumpers at the side, right? We can put in those little bit of caution protection where it's needed, but we don't want to stop playing the game,
mm,
right? And also, it doesn't mean that we're going to get a strike, right? And suddenly be the best bowling player ever. No, like we're still going to be learning and trying to get better at the game and experimenting, right? If I use a different size weighted ball, is that going to be the answer? If I have a different stance, right? That's part of the fun. It's part of the game, right? But we can have that middle influence of ourselves as adults is like, yeah, I can put the bumpers up to help soften the blow a little bit and make sure I'm not forever going in the gutter, but we don't want to do it to the extent that it stops us playing the game.
mm. Because then you die.
Yeah.
And my grandmother, and I've reminded myself of this recently, she said, I want to live until I die.
Mm.
And I forgot so many people want the sensation of aliveness while they're here, but we're just so caught up in other people's games and stories that we're losing sight of what it means for us to feel alive.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I've had a few friends now that I know that have like passed away, unfortunately, very young from cancer. And I'd say like I'm in those awful circumstances, one of the most beautiful lessons that they've taught me is how to live better,
Mm,
right? Like actually, like I didn't when they passed away, I didn't feel sorry for them or that they missed out. I was actually there watching them in awe as they go through this journey, actually closer to death, actually them experiencing more life and teaching me how to be more alive.
mm. And it wasn't 5 a.m. ice baths.
No,
That's not,
or singing
that's not,
Kumbaya on the tube.
yeah, that's not living better. It was probably be kinder to yourself and other people. It was probably have a little bit more compassion and offer help when you can, but also make sure you ask for help when you need. Like it's probably those simple things we all know.
Have more experiences, you know, like
Yeah.
they wish they gave more stuff a go and just tried and worried less, right?
Yeah. We get distracted with the wrong stuff,
We do. We do.
with the story that it should be different than it is.
And how, so, and I That's a great phrase. The story should be different than how it is. Is that something you come across often in your coaching?
Even for myself,
Mm,
yes. Uh, shouldn't be angry, should be kind and compassionate all the time. I mean, that's a big one at the moment. I should be different than I am. I shouldn't be angry right now. Yeah, but your experience is anger, Philip. Let yourself be angry. So, I mean, anger is an emotion I'm working on at the moment. And I mean, it's in everyone, and society even is afraid of it. Anger should be different than it is the story we're told, which is it shouldn't be a thing.
yep, I can speak for myself on that too, for sure.
But really helpful emotion. Boundary defense, you're overstepping, you need to have a conversation, but you also need to express anger, not at somebody, and not suppress it so that it comes out against yourself, which is the tactic I go after. So now I've just started screaming in the car really loudly to get anger out of my system, and it feels wonderful.
I love it. I've just got a car, so there we go.
Anger machine, the rage against the machine.
After this podcast, there I go.
But I mean, I'm learning that from Joe Hudson, who does
Mhm.
beautiful work. And I'm really glad I've come across him he's not mentoring me, but I am being mentored by him, uh, like by listening to his stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, that anger stuff is deeply healing at the moment. It's really
Mm.
helpful. And that's helping me make requests of people because there's a boundary that I want to reinforce or pay attention to. Um, but I think society, capitalism, everything will tell you what you have isn't enough. Who you are isn't enough until you experience, buy, look like, uh, all this stuff, sound like, look, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And another one that I have as well is I'm so sorry for crying. Sorry. Almost like people are trying to put their tears back in, right?
And you see, but we can. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. You're like, that's where you're wrong, Meg.
Yeah, no, but like, yeah, please put your tears away. Yeah, let me just fold them into this suitcase here.
Yeah. But the shame around that, I'm so sorry for crying. Like I shouldn't be, and I know that for myself as well. And I think that's they do say when you are coaching, when you're teaching, that's actually one of the way like I learned so much from that myself, right? In that doing and how often my clients will be crying out of emotion, right? Like, it's a relationship, that connection, talking about themselves, having these, living their experience, right? And they start crying. First thing that comes up is, "Oh, so sorry for crying." And I'm immediately like, no, like that's your lived experience. Like, I'm glad you're crying. But what is the first thing I do myself when I cry? So sorry for crying. Right.
Mm.
So it's so powerful when you get to coach mentor. It really is also you're learning and teaching yourself as you go as well in these experiences.
But that's why I say I've changed my mind about what coaching is, because I could have said, oh, you're crying because you're experiencing this emotion, and the thing to do is so that you never get back to there again. It's like, no, can I be with somebody crying? And if no, start with being with myself when I'm crying.
Yeah.
Then it's easier to be with somebody else. And
Beautiful.
that's the work.
Yes. So true. And how many of us can actually be with ourselves in those experiences? I know I still struggle with that.
Yeah, and I mean, my default is to just externalize and make sure everyone outside of me is okay. And then I wonder why I'm disconnected from myself. No, I mean, now it's reconnection time.
Right. And that's sounds similar to myself, right? I'm very high in relatedness, that idea, like relationships can be important to everyone, but for me particularly, right? When we talk about that reward and threat response, when you have that awareness of, how your brain works more and what is important to you, right? For me, it's a beautiful thing. Relationships are such a reward for me, and I get so much of my joy and experience from them. But also recognizing that's also where my learning is as well, my threat.
Mm.
A bit like yourself, right? That for me, the biggest threat is the idea that I could do anything that would impact my relationships in any way. And
Mm.
like that threat, my brain is going to do everything possible to stay away from it. Whereas actually having that awareness and that idea of like, actually, this is something that is very rewarding for me and beautiful, but there are also areas that to me that is quite scary. When you can sit in that uncomfortability and that awareness, we can then actually look about how can I make that a little less scary and
Mm.
actually help grow this area even more.
Yeah, so it's the two sides of the coin of hope. So I hope for this relationship and connection, but I'm afraid that it could go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Help me or tell me when you figure that out.
I think it's a continued figuring it out, right? It affects all areas you show up, right? It's something I figured out, I've been figuring out in my career, in my journey, right? Like the idea if I'm walking alongside people, then what does that look like? And it's being able to be honest in myself how I show up, right? That idea of, I want to be supportive, but they also you need to give challenge at times as well. And finding it's very easy to support. I love people and relationships, right? And I thrive in those areas, but then actually that would be very difficult for me to challenge in those areas
Mm.
because that I couldn't possibly threaten that relationship in any way. And then recognizing how others show up and how that affects their connection. Romantic relationships, realizing very recently that those are like the biggest mirror that you will ever have and how we show up in those. So I don't think it's one particular moment and I don't think I've arrived either. I think it is a constant journey of walking alongside. And like as I say, coaching is a relationship. So I'm learning about myself in that too.
Mm.
And it's like you beautifully said earlier, like it's learning to walk beside others, but also learning how to walk beside yourself too.
Yeah. Yeah. Work of a lifetime.
It is, it is for sure. And across, you've traveled the world, you've coached in many different environments, made connections in very different environments. What is a very like common theme that comes up a lot in your work that you hear? So to be more specific about that, what's one inner struggle that you seem to come across time and time again, no matter the industry?
So so there's a few. One is that when a leader's experience is different than they think it should be. So, for example, I shouldn't feel anxiety or fear or frustration or anger or any of those emotions because, or doubt and insecurity and lack of confidence because everyone around me looks like they have their shit figured out. So, that's a big kind of dissonance that shows up. The other one is around change and wanting other people to change quicker than they are, and being able to be with people as they are by role modeling that to the person that I'm working with. The other is like loneliness and isolation, and some
Mm.
people just not getting the feedback to actually help them improve and being with them, noticing what's good, noticing what could be better if they wanted to improve certain areas. I'm trying to go through some of the people, and then some of it's just the systems the people are in are overwhelmingly demanding of humans, and being able to avoid them experiencing shame that they're not enough. It's not that they're not enough or not good enough, it's because they're human and the system is not designed uh like thoughtfully for humans. It's designed for output over everything else.
Yeah.
So there's some of the kind of tensions that people bump into typically that we'll work through.
And what do you hope that vitamin P adds to the world?
I'm not sure. But if I had to guess, um, less aloneness, more connection, less chaos, more saying no and clarity, less people living in sympathetic
Hmm.
and instead visiting it and being able to get the balance of both, like wholehearted, sympathetic and parasympathetic. Um, yeah, just deeper connection to themselves and other people.
And how, I know you've talked about in the past, like connecting with others, the importance of having like compassion for others, right? And I think a lot of people blur the lines between empathy and compassion.
Mm.
For you, what is the difference?
So there's some really good research on this. So the Potential Project did, I think they have 1 million data points on compassion. And the empathy is I feel what you feel. So I'm with you in your emotion. And it's easy to get lost there and overwhelmed
Burned
and
out.
burned out. You can burn out from empathy. You cannot burn out from compassion, is what the research suggests.
Why?
So compassion is empathy plus action to alleviate the suffering. So empathy, if I empathize with you and we talk about maybe let's make it separate from us. Uh, Leader feeling lonely.
Yeah.
Oh, let me feel aloneness right now. And then let's explore together what they might do to increase the sense of connection that they feel. So I might give them, so let me go back a step for a second.
Yep.
Get them to feel aloneness and feel it with them. Get them to feel and experience the contrast of connection.
Hmm.
So now we have the tension or the connection between the two and the contrast of both. And then with that sense of connection as the more of this, get them to think about experiments and actions they could take to increase that. So all I've done is I've felt what you felt. You got co-regulation through my presence and through the conversation. And now you feel heard, seen, understood. And then the compassionate move is, and now what action will you take to alleviate that sense of aloneness, as an example? And so I don't hold that emotion for longer than it's needed.
That was what I was going to ask. So the difference there is instead of like leaving it at empathy of like I'm going to feel what you feel and now I'm going to also sit in that feeling and take that on too, it is feeling what you're feeling and then actually working with you of like what actions can we now take to get out of that? Is that what you're saying the difference is there?
Yeah, because again, if you imagine, so this morning I had two back-to-back calls and then I was meant to have a third and it was cancelled. But um, first conversation, certain challenge. Second conversation, different challenge. If I empathize, I'm left with the imprints of both of those and they'll blur. Give me 8 hours of that, for example, because it's late our time now. That's a lot of blurred, like what could feel like, I'm just imagining like sludge
Hmm.
versus no clarity, action, movement. Now I'm left with the same sense of clarity as the start of the day. That's the difference, I think, between empathy and compassion. And empathy also, I think you right size you in the conversation, what's yours to hold versus the other person. That's really important. I think people can forget themselves in the other. And I think we need to move back to, oh, okay, this is yours. there was some transference there or some stuff that was shared. I mean, there's levels and levels to this stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah. So
And
hopefully empathy plus action is compassion. You can't burn out from it.
yeah, I love that. And I always like to try and leave the listeners with some actionables here, some takeaway advice too. And like we discussed, so much of your work is like, or in coaching in general, it's a relationship, right? It's these conversations. What are, how do you teach people to have better conversations? What is like one small shift that someone listening could make today that would, you believe, could instantly improve how someone connects with others?
Just listen better. I was asked this morning in a coaching conversation, how do I influence and persuade other people to believe what I believe? I'm like, you can't and you don't, and you won't ever succeed at that. If you listen more, you might be able to actually create a awareness that people can move away from a pain that they're feeling towards a reward, like you said. So listen better and listen deeper and listen for the meaning below the words. And typically people just want sometimes to be seen, heard, and understood. And sometimes they want advice. Ask, what do you need from me in this conversation? And then listen to the answer and give them that. I mean, that's 1.0,
Well,
but it's a start.
I was gonna say, like, how do you? Because someone might be listening to this and be like, they already think they're a good listener. How do you listen better?
So, I mean, again, levels to this, right? So here's the thing.
Hmm.
As you listen, notice what you feel in your body as you hear their words. Do you tighten? Do you lighten? How does your body respond to their words? Did you have a judgment? Did you get excited? Or maybe get curious about how people are changing your experience. Maybe listen for that instead. Because then you can notice. I mean, this is going to take time, and I'm not there yet, but like when you meditate, you're able to then recognize that wasn't mine in the conversation. That was their excitement or their fear that I picked up on.
Hmm.
And I mean, that's the deepest level of listening I mean, I felt what you felt viscerally, and I was aware that it wasn't mine. I remember having a coaching conversation with somebody, and we were walking around Titanic. And after the conversation, I felt so much uncertainty. And I wasn't trained in recognizing that that wasn't mine. So I had listened to the content of the conversation, but I wasn't listening to the impression or the impact it was having on me. Notice your body a little bit more when you're in conversation. Notice when you're listening a little bit more. The other tactical tip is breathe through your nose when you're listening,
Hmm.
in and out through your nose, and wiggle your toes a little bit. And people think, oh, I won't be paying attention because I'm paying attention to that. You can do both. You're just making yourself present. So I
Yeah.
don't know if I answered your question or if it's
You,
clear, but
no, you did. And I think it's great advice. And I ask it because, way back when I used to think, yeah, I'm a great listener. But I was often listening to respond and not to understand, right? And I think your tip of actually being in your body and like, how does that feel what they're saying? It's that level of awareness and understanding again, isn't it? Being able to, oh, I actually understand. I'm taking the time to be aware of not only their words, but how that feels and that grounds you in that presence, right? And also slows you down often that speed, right? And think there's that we're in our heads. There's an expectation here.
Mm,
Someone's sharing something with me. There is an expectation for me to respond and
hmm
to respond well,
hmm
right? So I'm was stuck in listening to respond and not actually listening to understand, which is what the point is, right? We all want to feel like we have been heard and to be understood and for that to be held rather than actually someone's quick fired a response back to us, which actually we've probably not been listening because we've actually been going over in our head what would be the perfect thing to say.
Yeah. So, I mean, even another tip is just paraphrase back what you heard and check for understanding before you respond. I've made mistakes in coaching conversations where I've said, "Oh, that means X." And they said, "No, I meant Y." And it's like that's helpful. And I misfired because I wasn't listening deeply enough. And it's to slow down to that. I thought of something else when you asked that question. Oh, I know. I mean, if you want to watch as well. So, I mean, I'm saying about awareness of yourself and your reaction to them. If you also want to watch their reaction to what they're saying.
Mm.
So, I watch shoulders a lot, not directly, indirectly,
Yeah.
right? But you can watch people's breathing a lot of the time through their shoulders. And if you can see that somebody's breathing has gotten shallower or deeper, I mean, that's data. You're listening. Listening is just tuning attention. You're just using your ears or your awareness. So again, there's levels of this listening. I mean, start with just a little bit more.
Yeah, and I love those tips. And if we go with your analogy of like, ch tuning, it's that idea of like when you slow down and if we take on your advice of actually like how does it make you feel? How are you feeling to what you've heard? It's actually like making sure you're on the same frequency, right?
Mhm.
Because if you're listening in the way that I was in the past, and I can still slip into that at times. It's like you're listening, but it's like you're listening to a different channel, right? Because I'm not actually on the frequency that they're at or absorbing that. I'm busy in my own channel being like, right, what's my responsibility here? What do I have to do? I'm already deciding, right, they said this thing earlier, so this would be a good response, and
Mhm.
not actually listening to understand, experiencing what they're sharing, right? And I think listening is an experience just as much as it is speaking or having part of the conversation.
I mean, the other story to undo as well is that this is slower. It's not, it's quicker. Because you avoid your misunderstandings, you avoid not being heard, seen, understood. And that trust, for example, if it's teammates, when you go into battle in tight deadlines, under pressure, stakeholder visibility, all that kind of stuff, the speed with which you can make decisions and execute is profound if we listen deeper and slow down enough to listen deeply.
I agree. And I think it also kind of comes full circle to what we were talking about earlier in terms of that willingness to experiment and to fail as well. And I think
Mm.
that paraphrasing can be so important, but a lot of people don't do that because they're
hmm
like, well, I don't want it to seem like I'm unsure of what they're
Mm.
saying or not listening. And I know I've felt that in the past, but it really does long term, it's so much quicker, it's so much better, greater received, and avoids misunderstandings. Where,
Mm.
like, often now I say to my clients, I'm like, what is your definition of that? Instead of they might come to me and say, like, use the example from earlier, I'm angry today, I feel really angry. Instead of me going, like, I know I've been angry before, I know what that feels like, and responding from that, what does anger feel like to you?
Mm.
What does that mean to you? How does that show up? And go into that levels. I found when I've had that willingness to experiment with that and not it's funny, isn't it? When we try and be the perfect listener, right? And I am a listener when I've actually let that go and instead just been like, you know what, I'm learning to listen.
Yeah. I mean, can I push against everything I've said and just how to improve being a listener?
Please do, yeah.
So, Mr. Joe Hudson again has a cool model called View. And instead of thinking about the technique of let me listen better, he says get into the frame of mind of view, which is vulnerability, impartiality, empathy, and wonder.
Mm,
And if we can just rest in that state a little bit more, we're regulated, we're safe, we're present, we're attentive, we're engaged, we're connected. The listening happens without it being a technique that we're nearly forcing to be better or different. So maybe just to catch that a little bit as well.
yeah. No, I love that because it's like when the times where I really tried to listen,
Yeah, let me
you know,
force listening. Ugh, and now I can't remember.
I'm a great listener. I'm gonna be a fantastic listener here, or
Let me listen harder.
I'm here as a coach. I'm gonna be a great coach. So I need to be thinking, what are they saying? How am I
Yeah.
gonna respond to it? It's like,
Yeah.
no, and again, goes back to definitions. What does that mean to you? And like for coaching for me is that walking alongside and figuring out the answer together, and that idea of listening, actually like being in the moment instead of deciding what to respond with, actually like you said, feeling it, how does this make me feel in the moment, and actually being present and just listening to understand.
And I mean, there are times I have less capacity to listen.
Yeah.
I just want to, okay, just act, like whatever. That's a noticing. That's a listening. It's just not to another person. It's listening to yourself and go, do I have space for this right now? Do I have capacity? I'm not going to beat myself up if I just respond or react, and that's okay.
Yeah, and the ability then to communicate that, right? Again,
Mm,
that experimentation of like, oh, I'm people pleasing, right? Is a
yes.
type we often have. I've someone who I like to refer to myself as a recovering people pleaser. But that idea of like, oh, no, I can't do that. I've always shown up in this way, that ability to experiment and be like, well, actually, what if I showed up as someone else and actually listened, like you said, to my capacity today and actually how I felt in that moment and experimented. It's not going to go perfectly. How play around with how I communicate that to people.
Mm,
And in that experiment, you like you would in a normal experiment, you have a hypothesis, you do the experiment, and then you get the results and you go from there. It might be that you learn actually, oh, that was a good way of framing that or heard. Or maybe actually that is that type of this person is not going to react well for what I'm saying because I'm showing up differently. It's just
mm,
that ability. I think adults might, well, at least from my experience, have a lot of adults have that difficulty if I was to frame that play around because often we can be, I don't have the time for that, or I'm not a child, or I'm not this. But actually, experiment is a word that they can be a bit more familiar with and is a bit more worth their time, I
mm.
find.
Yeah, and it's almost just to soften what you know so that you listen for what you don't know.
Yeah,
Mm.
for sure. Well, I appreciate the tips there. I love that, especially as I say, understanding that, first of all, a lot of people don't know that there's a difference between compassion and empathy.
Mm.
Is, and there's different ways to use them. And then also, as I say, tools in terms of listening and how we show up and how we connect better as humans. So I really appreciate your insights on that for sure. And if you could give every new leader in the world one thing, not a tool or a strategy, but something internal, what would it be?
An acceptance that they're human, and so are
Mm,
the people that they work with. And the deeper you can accept it for yourself, that you have flaws and that that's okay, and that the organization will expect you to go beyond your human capacity. Same with your team. I think the kinder we would be to each other and ourselves.
love that. I love that. And in terms of my bigger question, something I wanted to finish on is a phrase I've heard you use quite a lot, and it's actually you described at the start of the call how often you're described as genuine, right? Another word I would use for you is wholehearted.
Mm.
That's something I've heard you use yourself in talking about the work that you do.
Mhm.
What, and again, practicing what I preach and how I like to understand other people's definitions and not just assume it's the same as my own. For you, what does it mean to live and lead wholeheartedly, not just in theory, but in practice?
So, ignoring the theory, I think it's uh, creating the space for me to just be. So, typically for me, that's in nature, to slow down, to experience the moment in front of me a little bit more often, to be joyful and excited and allow myself to do all of that kind of good side emotional experience. Um, to allow myself to cry,
Mm,
allow myself to be angry, allow myself to be frustrated and anxious and scared, and to be as open as I can in any of the conversations that I have because I've given myself that permission to just be open with myself. So the theory is sympathetic, parasympathetic is one side and the other. So the wholehearted is the experience of both, a wider range of life. But wholehearted is just this different orientation towards the moment in front of us.
mm,
It's a welcoming of it rather than an expectation.
yeah,
And I think a lot of suffering would end if we were more wholehearted in that way.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing your definition of that with me. And I invite anyone listening to think about what your definition is of wholehearted and
Mm,
how you intend to show up wholeheartedly and the ways that you do that, the way that you access that for yourself. And I'm so grateful for you showing up wholeheartedly today, Phil. I've every experience that I've had with you has been wholehearted. I appreciate you so much, both as a friend, as a fellow coach, but also as a human. And how can other people, if they're listening today and really are connecting with the things that you're sharing and want to hear more about the wisdom and the wholeheartedness that you have to share, how can they firstly support you and also access some more of your teachings and what you're sharing?
so I have my own podcast, Vitamin P Coaching Podcast. Um, I've been documenting my learning for the last roughly 2 years because I was on a course and I had to keep a learning log. And I thought how privileged I am to learn about this stuff.
For
What if I
sure.
just shared it? So I've opened my learning log and it's a podcast and I've had some cool guests on. And I mean, hopefully someday you'll come on it as well. And
I'd love
I get
to.
to flip the script and ask you questions as well, right?
Yes,
Um, Vitamin P Coaching on Instagram, Philip Brady on LinkedIn. Um, and it was interesting he said, how can I don't know how to ask people for support, so I don't know
mm,
what that looks like. And I don't want to cry at the thought of receiving from an audience that I know nothing about or don't know yet. But I think it's just say hello, tell me what you learned and what you'll do, and how you might love a little bit more in the world.
I love that. So if you're listening to that, that is how you can support Phil. And if you can resonate that with that, I know I can, of it is difficult to ask for support sometimes. It's
Mm,
even a step before that, recognizing that you need support before you're really in the thick of it,
mm,
right? And then so asking support to stop yourself getting there, but also knowing what that support might look like for you, because that might be different for other people. So I would love for us to support you in that way, Phil. And I personally love the podcast. It's such beautiful conversations, and I love the way that you think and reflect, and that you're so generous in sharing those. So, yeah, I hope other people can join me in listening to you there and what you've got to share. So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much for coming on. Anyone who's listening, in the episode description, I'll put all of the links to Phil so you can find him more easily. And yeah, get to experience his wholeheartedness a little bit more and hopefully help you show up a little bit more wholeheartedly too. So yeah, thank you so much, Phil. You're most definitely my kind of person, and I appreciate you a lot.
Much love. Thank you.
You're welcome.